So thanks for being here. And John Hunter will now welcome our speaker.
Okay, well, good morning. And I quote, I've worked with successful CEOs, survivors of domestic violence, our homeless, and teens, simply trying to navigate this thing called life. All of them shared this one truth. The success of your life will be directly equivalent to your willingness to show up, dig deep, and do the work. These are the words of Dani Cook. Dani Cook grew up as a biracial child in the South, is a disabled veteran, a domestic and sexual abuse survivor, and suffers the challenges of Graves' disease. Some people would call these hurdles obstacles. Well, Dani is a certified life coach with a focus on communications and conflict resolution, trauma recovery, and healing, and she considers them enabling. Dani is also a warrior and a poet. Whether leading a 247-day peaceful protest against a state-created medical monopoly, Ballard Health, and the Departments of Health in Virginia and Tennessee, to crossing state lines with a family while sheltering a toddler and his grandmother armed only with a multicolored umbrella against right-to-lifers armed with body cams, bullhorns, and ladders, Dani has been an advocate wherever possible. In the spring of 2023, Dani, as strategic advisor for Ruralvote.org, embarked on a project to identify the top 100 rural counties nationwide where we could build power in 2024 and beyond. And rather than think about the seats of representatives we would like to flip and seeing what it would take to make that happen, Dani took a data-driven approach and followed where it would lead. We all know Michigan is a battleground state, and it will be contested right down to the bitter end. Michigan has 10 counties that made this nationwide list: Benzie, Eaton, Emmett, Grand Traverse, Isabella, Leelanau, Manistee, Midland, Muskegon, and Saginaw. They made this top 100 rural counties list because they have a powerful impact on all 3 federal elections and multiple key House races. The numbers are clear, and the data provides us with a path to not only short-term wins, but to long-term successes. There are seats that can be flipped within the next cycle, and others where the needle can be moved in a more forward, stronger, definitive way through effective messaging and organizing strategies that work. Besides the data and metrics needed by rural organizers across the county, this is another word that keeps coming up: hope. This is an emotion we must tap into when speaking to each other and with prospective voters. Policy and issues simply aren't enough anymore. As Dani has also said, at the end of it all, I want to be able to say that I contributed more than I criticized. Don't we all? Please welcome Dani Cook.
John, you did your homework. I'm listening to you and I'm like, oh my God, he's been to my website. He's been to my Facebook. He's been here. Like I know where you picked up all of those pieces. It sounds so weird to hear it all put together, but thank you guys. Sorry, I gave you a scare when I hadn't registered for the Zoom already. We moved our website at Ruralvote from Wix to Squarespace, and I had no ability to email and got all kinds of weird things, but I'm here and grateful to be here. I do have one question before I get started. How long do I have? Because y'all know I can talk.
About 20 minutes, Dani.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So then what I'm going to do is dive right in. And what I want to first do is share a little bit with you about the top 100 rural county project specifically for Michigan that I presented on at the Rural Caucus. And then I'm going to go straight into the second training that I did, which was don't just organize, be effective. Because those are the things that are most concerning. And then I do want to talk briefly about you all's pop-up with your yard signs and the things that you guys have going on there, because as y'all know, we're running yard sign campaigns in Montana, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. We're about to send our second round of signs out to Michigan. Some of you guys probably got an email from me yesterday. And so I want to talk about kind of what that looks like and the arc of that over the next little bit. So I'm going to head right on in and start to share my screen. So is this the first one? It is. Yay, look at me. Okay, so I'm going to pull you guys out of my way and feel free to put questions in the chat. and I will address them as we go. So this project was part of the top 100 rural county, and it was a data-driven project. So what I did was manually go through all the counties, started with the top battleground states in the country, and then identifying the counties within those states. And we tried to look at where can we move the needle, right? So I'm not going to go over the purpose of the training because it's not necessary, because we're not doing the whole thing. I will, however, make this available to you. I'll just email it to you guys and have somebody send it out to you. Okay. I want to, you already know the background for me. The only thing you might not know is that I did work the Abrams campaign in 2022, which was awesome. You're not here for all of this, so I don't have to worry about the disclaimer. You know, we're part of this ecosystem. So I'm going to get going with this. Okay. So this project, I believe that everything comes down to 4 pillars. When we're talking about how we organize people, I believe that there are 4 pillars that every issue comes back to, and they are healthcare, housing, education, and economic mobility, right? So when we talk about what's coming up for this election, you're going to hear people say we're fighting for democracy. A lot of people don't even know what that is. There are various ideas. I had somebody argue with me the other day via text and say, well, do we live in a republic or a democracy? And I was like, we have a democratic republic, right? And they were like, well, when did that change? And people just want to argue about semantics and things that maybe they're using language and it's not the same thing. So I think that it's important for us not to argue the national things that are so divisive. I'm not going to argue with anybody about Biden. I'm not going to argue with anybody. I want to talk about the issues that matter to the people in our rural communities. And if you hear a little like something in the background, I have my grandbabies with me, so give me grace. That's the youngest one, and she's learning. The oldest 2, they're used to Tutu doing this, and they got it. This youngest one, she's just in training, so give her a little grace. She's playing a game. So I'm going to show you how we analyze this data. Why is this important? Because it was very data-driven. So if you start with this process, you'll be able to do this every single year. My hope is at some point to develop a program that will do some of this analyzing for us. But since I'm not the analytical guru, I did this all manually. So what I did for Michigan was I started with your 2020 presidential results, your 2020 Senate, your gubernatorial House, your voter registration data, your turnout results, your state population, and your percent rural. Now, sometimes when I'm identifying counties, you might be like, oh, well, that county itself is not considered rural, but a lot of our rural constituents live right outside cities that, you know, aren't the county itself isn't going to be rural, but there's a significant rural population that surrounds them. So when you see some of that, know that that's how we got here. So once I did that, I took states that had margins of 10% or less in each of these races, and then identifying those that are swing states or battleground states. And then within those states, I did the same thing for counties. I see a question in the chat. Somebody's not getting my audio. Okay. And then once I did that, so imagine notebooks upon notebooks, and I did it for every single election and then cross-reference them. And the idea was to see which counties kept coming up on every single election with those margins that were slimmer. And once I identified the ones that kept repeatedly showing up, then those were the counties that we knew we could move the needle. And it was interesting to see, like sometimes you would see within the same election cycle, you would see a county that for, say, the Senate voted blue, but for the House voted red. And you'd be like, what in the world? What happened? And it'd be the same county. Well, sometimes it was because the incumbent was of a particular party. And because the people knew the person, the party didn't matter. And so that's something to remember when we're talking about these things. Sometimes we want to stress party, and there is a need to promote the Democratic Party in our rural counties, but we also want to do it in a way that's not divisive and know what actually matters at the end of the day. So once I did that, then we identified the population of the county, the percentage of rural people, and then the final thing was to look and say, well, hey, do these counties have any common districts or seats, places where we can make powerful change? Because that was the other thing that came up, is like, well, where can we build power? So these are your top 11. Now you're going to say, wait, I thought John said there were 10. There were 10 that made the move for the top 100 for this cycle, but there were a total of 11 for you guys that actually were places where we could move it. But the difference is like, if you didn't have a place where we could make a powerful move, like flip a seat or something like that, then you didn't make the power building list. But you all have 11 counties total, and this is them. So a collaborative approach with multiple organizations in these communities with specific goals for this year through 2032. And that's a weird number, I know, but for me, when I look at this data and I look at how we can make change, we've got about 2 terms in which to do that. And we can make consistent, measurable progress in every single one of these. So right now, while we are focusing on 2024, we have to be also looking ahead, like with both scenarios, folks. What do we do with how these outcomes turn out, right? What do we do if Trump gets reelected? What do we do if Biden has a second term? What do we do, in terms of your state and your Senate races and things like that? So looking at what that looks like, it doesn't stop after the election. You're going to have to hit the ground running. So what I tell people is the election ends, great. Breathe until January 5th and then get ready to start organizing. The problem is we take the off years, the off cycle years, and we rest. Republicans do not do that, especially in rural communities. Okay. So this is a brief glimpse of why these counties made the list. So all of these counties are 23 to 100% rural with 640,111 registered voters and a rural population of 332,213. That means half of the population is rural, right? And so they make it because they have a powerful impact on 3 federal elections and multiple key House races. So House Districts 1, which people were very surprised to hear me say, 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8 have 1 or more of these counties in their voting population, with 3, 7, and 8 being considered battleground seats for 2023. Benzie, you guys already know the names of them, right? But so these particular counties had 175,252 registered voters in the presidential election that didn't vote at all. Now, can you imagine knowing what we were facing in 2020 and not voting? Those folks could not bring themselves to vote either way. And that's more than enough to cover the 154,188 vote difference. I can promise you somewhere there's a Republican strategist that's going after those 175,000 rural voters that didn't vote so they can flip this state. They have a really strong rural game. And if we want to keep and extend the margin that we won in 2020, we have to focus on these counties, right? Your Senate race had a margin of less than 2%. There was a voting difference of just over 92,000 voters. 179,000, almost 180 registered voters didn't participate in the election. And here we go to House District 1. 52% of the registered voters needed to flip the seat didn't vote in that last election. So when I look at this strategy about how do we go about, these are the numbers. And like I said, I'm going to give you this presentation. But when we talk about who to go after and how we go after these things, it is easier to go after someone who has already registered to vote or is voting, right, or has voted in the past, than to convince somebody who's never voted to register to vote and all of a sudden take an interest in something they've never had. The only way you do that typically is if they've had something personally impact their lives, right? Sissy, not so loud, okay? The monster's chasing her in the game, sorry. So these are the rest of the numbers. Okay, ask Dominic. So these are the rest of the numbers, and I'm not going to go over them because the most important part is once you get this data is how do you use it? And I'm going to show you that part in the organizing, but let me check the chat for questions. Okay, everybody's got it. We're good. Any questions about the data before I move into the actual organizing part? And I know that I talk fast, so tell me if I need to slow down. I'm trying to get a lot in 20 minutes.
The data is encouraging, Dani. I mean, that's what I really got from that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, the data for me, so I had moved home last year to take care of my mom. My mom got ill. And so I was at home doing this project with her. And she would be like, girl, it is 10 o'clock. Are you going to stop working today? And I was like, well, yeah, but wait, did you know that there are 6 counties in the state of South Carolina that are like, they're rural and they can be flipped? And yep, you can play, get Dominic. And so she was like, what? And I was like, South Carolina, like this was the thing. People lie, polls lie because people run the polls. But what doesn't lie is the numbers. That's what doesn't lie. And the bottom line is when I look at the numbers, it shows me where we can move. So what's missing in these communities? Why don't we know that the numbers are this close? Because they don't want us to know, right? It would give people in our communities hope that things can change. And the idea is if you can rob people of their hope and you can give them fear, you can get away with just about anything. So the idea is to take the data as a building block and then go from there. And so what do? You have a strong foundation of data that says this is where I'm going to go, even if I don't normally go here. How many times have you guys been out canvassing in van and they're like, oh, don't even bother to go to that area of town. Don't even bother to go to that county because it's so whatever. No, disregard that. Look at the actual voting results and go knock on the doors. And then what do you do when you get to the doors? So I'm going to show you the effective organizing, maybe. I don't want that one. Let me stop sharing this one. And then I'll go to the other one. Whoop. I gotta get Zoom out of my way. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Perfect. Thank you guys for helping me with Sissy. All right, so this one, I used to feel bad about family, but I don't anymore. That's one thing that COVID taught me was we are all human beings. And I grew up in an era where we were taught, you don't bring your family into the workplace, leave your personal stuff at the door. But the reality is you can't do that. You can't do that because we are people and we don't get to separate ourselves. We are who we are. And I think the more that we talk about those types of things, then the more we're going to be able to connect with each other. So like, yeah, my grandbabies are 100% of my life. It's how I got to be outside of a protest for 257 days. Yes, mama. So I don't ignore them anymore. Yeah, Dominic, will you get Sissy some juice? All right, so I came up with this title, Don't Just Organize, Be Effective, because people will say, oh, we knocked 30,000 doors, or we knocked 10,000 doors. Yeah, but were you effective? In the conversations that you had, were you effective? Did you gain compliance or commitment from people, right? How long did you get them to talk to you? So the important thing is, how do we have engaging conversations with people of opposing views? And you might say, well, Dani, what do you know about that? A lot. I'm from Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia. Where I live, where I'm from, it is 96 to 98% white. Washington County is our most diverse county, and that's because it's a college town, so it's 91% white. It is probably 99.9% Christian, and pretty red, right? So, the thing is that those people back home would vote for me if I ran for office today. They tell me that every day because I fought for them with healthcare. And so even though we have opposing views on just about everything, right? There are many of them that have met me and changed their perspectives because we've connected and they know I actually care, right? Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. And ignore her wild hair. Yes, baby. Can you wait 1 minute? Bubby, will you help her? So I always say intentions, but we're not doing that. Do you want a snack? Okay. Okay, we'll get it in just a second. All right. So this is the same disclaimer. So I'm going to skip this stuff. Oh, wait, I do want to go back. So I break down organizing into personal things and practical things. So on a personal side, you better know your why. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. 4 things that are needed for every conversation: your energy and emotion, right? And then on the practical side, the 4 pillars for organizing: triggering topics. You can probably already guess what some of those are. Overcoming objections, which I love. It's one of my favorite things. And then a communication hack. As you heard at the beginning, John told you I'm a certified coach, but we focus a lot on communication and not in the way that you probably think. So I'll talk about a yard sign campaign in a minute. How did I go backwards? I don't know, but I did. Okay, so this is my thing. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I will die on this hill. What, baby? Okay, wait 1 minute. You want to play? Go ahead. You can open the operation game. I will live and die on this hill. I don't care what you are talking to people about. If they do not believe that you truly care about them, you might as well be talking to the wall. But once they know how much you care about them, how much you know actually matters. So what's your why? This is the part that I love. Why do I say you need to know this? Has anybody ever heard of like an elevator pitch? Yeah, if you've ever been in sales, you know what an elevator pitch is. That means in 60 seconds, you got to be able to touch me, move me, inspire me, and get me to buy in to the thing that you're selling. So you have to know what your why is when you're out knocking doors and people have to believe you, right? And so what I normally do when I do training sessions is I will have people give me their whys. What, babe? You want to play? Dominic, will you please play with her until I finish? I'm almost done. Pop. Okay, so go. Bubby's going to play it with you. Okay, so normally I have people do this and I'll say, hey, do you believe them? I'll have somebody practice. Does anybody want to give 60 seconds real quick? I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. Does anybody want to give it a whirl and tell me why you do this work in 60 seconds or less? Anybody want to be brave? No?
Sure, Danny. I have
All right,
5 grandchildren. I have 5 grandchildren and a great friend who says, activism is my rent for living on the planet.
Love that. Okay. So now let me ask you guys, I know you know Sam, but if you didn't know Sam and you heard her say that, would you believe her that she meant it? That that's why she does things? You would. Now let me ask you this. Did it touch you? Were you touched emotionally? Did you feel a connection to her? Were you moved at all? That's what's required in organizing. So I'll share with you mine. Okay. So I grew up in a place where my voice absolutely didn't matter. Biracial, the early 70s, it just wasn't a fun place to be a kid. And so I lived my life knowing that my vote didn't matter where I lived. And I thought everything was kind of rigged and it was going to be what it was. And then finally, politics affected my life in a really, really major way. They changed the laws where I'm from. They closed the NICU that saved my second grandbaby's life using a state senator who worked for the healthcare company. They robbed 1.2 million people of healthcare. And I've watched people die. Literally, I've listened to their family stories. And I learned that politics isn't some abstract thing. It is the way that we all live. And what I know is that it doesn't matter if I don't even like you. I believe that every human being deserves a good life. And I shouldn't be able to tell you, and nobody else should be able to tell you that you can't have it and that you don't deserve it if you're poor, if you're white, if you're Black. And so for me, it became about how do I change things? And so as much as I don't like politics, here I am. And that's why I do the work that I do. Did you believe me? Did I touch you?
That was
You
brilliant.
moved. So that's the key. So many of us, when we do this work, we're used to regurgitating just the like, hey, activism is what we do. We're in this for what we need to do, right? You're doing good. Tutu's almost done, okay? And then I'll get you a lollipop, okay? But the key is to be vulnerable with people. And you have to be able to tap in and do that and tell the truth. It's easy when you're being authentic. Every time I say that, I say it differently because I know why I do it. So it's not some memorized thing that I spit out. It's not a sales pitch. If I know the things that I need to touch on, then I'll find different words every single time, but they'll be effective because people will know that I actually mean it because I do, right? And even my grandkids know it. Dominic was like, Tutu, I thought we were going to have one day where you didn't have meetings or a live. And I said, baby, me too, but we got to do this. And it's just give me 1 hour. And he was like, okay, you know what I mean? And we'll go from there. So let me get back into this presentation. So what I want you to do, come here, babe. Tutu's almost done. What I want you to do is when you think about what your why is, think about how you communicated and what are the main things that make you show up. Why are you here on a Saturday morning when there's plenty of other things that you could be doing? Why are you here? Why do you do this work? Why do you do pop-up yard signs, right? And then I want to talk about communication. This is my favorite quote when it comes to communication. Between what I think, what I want to say, what I believe I say, what I say, what you want to hear, what you believe to hear, what you actually hear, what you want to understand, what you think you understand, what you really understand. There are 10 possibilities that we might have some problem communicating, but let's try anyway. That's what it's like. And for every person on here, that's times 10, right? 10 times 10 times 10. We can miscommunicate. That's why we want to make sure that we're using the same words so that we all understand what each other is saying. I'm checking the chat real quick. Thank you, Sam. Okay, so effective communication. I believe there are 4 things that you have to bring to every conversation to be effective. The first is respect. Respect is not present if you're calling them maggots. Respect is not present if you say you're voting against your own best or you're in a cult. Even if they are in a cult. Yeah, baby. Here, you want a drink? The second one is compassion. We have to have compassion because let me just say this. Even if they are in a cult and they don't know it, we should be compassionate about that. What is it? You want what? You sleepy? Okay, get on my shoulder. What is it that's going on in that person's life that's making them, it's putting them at risk for even being in a cult? What's happened? Where's the compassion? I've already said you have to be authentic and you have to be vulnerable. And here's what's hard about that for boomers and Generation Xers. We have been taught that emotions don't matter. They are not quantifiable. They don't get the job done. Suck it up and drive on, right? And I'm military, so I definitely have been taught that. But it's not true. Not if you want to touch people. You must be vulnerable. And vulnerability is your greatest strength. So energy and emotion. If you go to doors and you're having conversations with people, your energy is what they're going to feel first. And it matters what emotion you leave them with. The greatest emotion at all is hope. Some people think it's love, but it's not. Love is fleeting and love is fickle. Hope is powerful. So I give people this example and it's kind of cheesy, but here we go. So I'm a Hunger Games fan. I love the Hunger Games franchise. If you've ever seen it, you see President Snow and he's talking to the game maker and, they're controlling all the poor people and all the other factions, all the other segments, right? And he says to them that hope is dangerous. He says a little bit of hope is good, right? Because you don't want people just to like die off, but too much hope is bad for the people who want to be in charge, who want to dominate. Because if you give people enough hope, they can rebel, they can bring about change, right? And then the people in power lose that power. So it's important that when we leave these conversations with people, we know that we want to get them to the place of hope. Now, you might not be the person that gets them finally there, right? But you might be the person that plants the seed and so forth and so on. So just keep that in mind. So these are the 4 pillars, what I call the 4 pillars when we talk about issues. So healthcare, housing, education, and economic mobility. So when you're out organizing, I'm almost done. Yes. Let Tutu finish. I'm going to tell them real quick, okay? Okay, you want down? All right, so when you're out and you're organizing, the candidate that you're talking about, you've got to have specific examples, 2 to 3 or 1 to 2 examples in each of these areas of policies they've either passed if they are the incumbent or policies that they would like to pass. And when you mention those policies, they must be 2 things, relevant and realistic. So there has to be a time frame in which this thing will come to fruition. They don't want pie in the sky promises, and it must be tangible. And you've got to be able to communicate that in a way that people can see it and feel it and know that it's a thing that can actually happen, right? So That's what you want to kind of do. Don't use words like the PACT Act if you're talking to veterans, because we won't know what that is. Just tell us how we can get our benefits, right? Don't talk about the Infrastructure Act. Talk about the bridge down the street or the road that got repaved and those types of things. Be specific without using the big words and things that people get tied up in, okay? We hear this all the time. Democracy is on the ballot. We're going to hear that all the way through November. But what does it mean? Most of the time in rural communities, not because people are dumb, people don't often know. Like where I'm from, we literally have a legal medical monopoly, and people back home think it's socialized healthcare. It is not. It's extreme capitalism. I literally have talked to people where they'll say, you know, I'm so grateful I have my insurance through that Affordable Care Act, but I don't like that on Obamacare. We got to get rid of that Obamacare. Well, they don't know that the Obamacare is the Affordable Care Act, right? All they know is they don't like Obama and Obamacare. So it's important when we're talking about things that we use language that we can all understand and that we know what they are. I'm not going to talk to somebody about quote unquote Medicaid expansion. What I am going to do is say, hey, would you like to have access to healthcare? And does your niece deserve it? And does whatever, you know what I mean? Those types of things. Hey, this is what Bubby needs to help you with. Tutu can't do that. So your organization must carve out this messaging in a way that's effective. Okay. This is some information. So people would be surprised. Did you know that if you get an endorsement from a pro-choice organization, it boosts a candidate's appeal more than an endorsement from the Farm Bureau or a labor organization? We actually have a commission poll. When I send this to you, there's a link in it. Okay. So how do we talk about abortion access and reproductive rights? 1, don't debate viability, gestation, bodily autonomy, or religion. I do that sometimes, but usually only with the folks that are being horrendously nasty and they're outside of a clinic or something, but do demonstrate specific examples of how abortion laws are hurting healthcare, especially in rural communities, right? So we have a hard time recruiting physicians, especially specialists anyway, right? But because of these abortion bans, we are losing OBGYNs. And that's not only the people that deliver babies, that's the people that handle ovarian cancer. That's the people that handle uterine cancer. That's the people that, you know what I mean? People don't think about the other things that are impacted when we lose these specialists. So when you start to talk about the number of women that die from these particular cancers, when we talk about the women that want to have birth, there's a great article. KFF did a big interview where they talked to like 500 or 600 reproductive doctors across the country. And they talked about how much since the abortion laws were passed, it actually has hurt their ability to do emergency. Do I connect this to a hospital? Oh my God, Carrie, I love you. Of course I do. I'm going to get there too. And I have a whole little pamphlet on rural hospital closures. So yes, we do connect them. So you want to talk about how is this impacting you? I don't have to talk about abortion. I'm never going to convince you to say, yes, abortion is a great thing, because I don't think that any of us think it's like, hey, let's go have an abortion, right? But we know that it's sometimes necessary. And so instead of saying, well, are you going to adopt a baby and all those things, who cares? Can we talk about how it's actually impacting our rural community? Like in the state of Ohio, so I started doing these things. What we want to do with our yard sign campaign is, as we recruit our local vocals, we want to be able to give you information to put out on social media. So I've started pulling stats for, like, I've already done Ohio. So like in the state of Ohio, 80% of their counties don't have access to a hospital that has OB care. What? That's astounding, right? So imagine when we pull these stats for Ohio and Michigan, and you can talk to your neighbors and say, did you know that in Michigan, we have this many, maternal deserts? We have this many, people have to drive this many miles. We've had this many hospital closures. Those are all things that matter. And it is the middle to lower class that suffer the most. We know this. Rich people are always going to get health care. And Black and Native Americans have the highest rates of maternal mortality. And it doubles in rural areas. Now, I will share with you one thing that I will do. If somebody is just devout and they want to keep throwing the God thing at me, I'm here because God doesn't want you to kill babies, right? and I know that's not someone I'm winning over, then I will happily engage just one time. And this is the way that I do it. Because I need to be effective in communication. So I'll say to people, so let me ask you a question. You say that God is the reason you want abortions banned everywhere, your faith, correct? And they'll say yes. And I'll say, great. So I want to make sure that you are talking about the same God that I was raised with, because I was raised in the deep South, right? So do you believe that God is the giver or the creator of life? What do you think they say? Yes. Okay, great. So do you believe that God is all knowing? Does he know our beginning from our end, what we're going to do before we do it? And what do you think they say? Yes. So what am I already getting them to do? I'm getting them to say yes, right? And I'll say, good. So do you believe that God is everywhere present? They say yes. Me too. That's how I was raised. Do you believe that God is all powerful? And they say yes. And I'll say, okay. So based on what you just told me about your God, at the time he gives a woman what you consider to be life, he knows if she's going to have an abortion. He's with her in the clinic when she has it done, and he does not use his power to stop it. So can you tell me why you know better than God? And they will try to deflect, right? Oh, but what if it, no. I don't want to talk about what if it's a 2-year-old. I don't want to talk about any of that. I want to talk about God, because you said that's the reason you're here. So tell me why you know better than God. Or do you not know better than God and you're just here because your ego, or it makes you feel good, or it makes you seem higher than someone else? And if that's the case, can you tell me how that's godly? And I'm not going to win that person over, but I promise you they will think about what I've said when I left. And we're almost finished. So what's an objection? So an objection is, I got 3 minutes. I got you. What's an objection? An objection is a request for more information. It simply means they don't have enough information to make an informed decision. When's the best time to overcome it? Before you get it. So think about, what are people going to say that's negative about your candidate, and address it on the front end. So when I talk to people about Biden, I will cover it really quickly. He's old as hell. He's a white elderly man, right? Yes, he's he's kind of straddling the fence and not being direct enough when it comes to the Israeli and Palestinian war. I get all of that. And the other guy's white, the other guy's old. And here's the difference between the two, right? What I know is that regardless whatever's going on with Biden, I don't care if you think he's got, Alzheimer's or not. He's got a smart cabinet around him that is getting things done. So give me the guy who's old and smart enough to still put smart people in the room to get it done, right? Rather than a guy that wants to kind of destroy everything. Give me the guy who used to say things like forced busing and now says, hey, I was on the wrong side of those issues, than the guy who still thinks the Central Park 5 should be, executed even though they've been exonerated. Address the objections before you get them for all of your candidates. And then this is your communication hack. You will get this. People process differently. So some people are listening for tasks. That's me. Some people listen for ideas. Some people listen for relationships. And some people listen for process. So when you are talking, when you are writing your messaging, when you are doing your social media posts, you want to use words that make people listen. So I will say things like, to the point. I will use bullet points for producers. That also helps analysts because they want to know the steps of things to do. If I want people to imagine something, I will say, gosh, can you imagine a world where every child gets a quality education right there in their neighborhoods? Can you imagine a space where we are kind to each other, where we engage in conversations where we don't agree, but we do it amicably with respect? Can you imagine that? And then talk about the we, us together share. That's how you get people to listen. We're going to do this today. So that is it. Hopefully I hit my 3 minutes, Sam. And that's all I got.
Oh,
I'll make sure you get the decks.
thank you so much, Dani. And this is recorded and will go out to our 500 members, but you are one amazing woman, and I'll be calling you back soon. Thank you.
Glad to be here. Appreciate you all, and look forward to talking to you soon. Let me know what happens with your yard signs, because those are the value signs, Sam.
Yes,
And we are
we
going to
got
have, great. And they're going to be candidate signs that come out in August or September. So we want to get value and then connect them to the candidate. So keep in touch. See you
Okay,
guys later.
thank you, Dani.
All right. Bye.